Hi everyone, how's it going? Say hi. How's it feel a little bit weird, my name is Bonnie Violet. I'm one of the folks who runs Transgender Teen along with my partner Pacey, who's going to be on my here in a second. I just wanted to thank you all for being here this evening and watching the Teen Rights Center for allowing us to use this space. It's pretty new, and so it's a really great space. But I just wanted to let you know that I know you see like lots of different cameras and mics and things, and so we are live streaming on YouTube. So the camera is just on us, not on any people. So I just want to be clear for your today. Also, we are going to have opportunities for you to ask questions. You're welcome to come up to the mic and ask a question there. If you do that, it is going to be live streamed and recorded. So if you don't want it to be, just let us know, or just kind of use discretion when asking your question. For accessibility reasons, we really wanted to try to have a live stream. We may also have some questions from folks who are listening online that we'll be able to interact with. So hand it over to Pacey to give you a little bit more ability.
Thank you, and thank you again for being here. Really excited to be part of people that are here tonight. And just to touch on the people asking the questions, your voice will be recorded, but we're not going to have camera on YouTube. So, and I can also edit out your question if you're not comfortable with that. Just talk to me after this. So we're going to start with a book reading, and if you are interested in reading the book, we have copies of it for sale. We have Mike and Angie Devitt, who are the authors, and we're going to start with just them reading some of the readings that they've. Whatever you guys ended up, there was some discussion beforehand. We're going to open it up to some questions for you, and then we're just going to have a podcast, which is just basically going to be a conversation. So I think we're good to start. Okay. Here's my Angie Devitt.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. This really means a lot to us, so thank you. We're not going to read the whole book, I promise, but just for a little bit of context, and partly what I think we're going to do is try to show you kind of who Eve is, since Eve isn't here, because you can find out who we are. However, we're going to try to give you a little bit of an insight into a complex human, which is always fraught, but we'll give it a shot. A question Angie and I often get asked is if we knew Eve was misgendered, and did we realize something was amiss early in her childhood? The difficulty in answering this question is you are always living your life in the context of the moment, and that context does not always present itself with these kinds of questions. Hindsight lends clarity and context. With hindsight, we can say there definitely were signs. For example, it's true that Eve always chose Halloween costumes that were gender neutral, dressing as a chocolate bar, a marshmallow, or an androgynous character from a cartoon or a comic that we were unfamiliar with. Even at a very young age, pink was Eve's favorite color. There was a time on a trip to Disneyland when Eve was taking forever to select a souvenir from the gift shop. I tried to help, pointing out shirts and sweatshirts, but none were right. Only once I left her alone did she finally select a shirt from the girls section of the shop, and proudly wore it for the rest of the day. She always wore a shirt while swimming, even at a very young age, never feeling comfortable with going bare-chested, and never did so in public. After getting a particularly bad haircut, a cut that was much shorter than she'd hoped, she wore a baseball hat and glasses every day for a month until her hair grew to an acceptable length. There was a time in grade school where the teacher assigned students in the class to make an argument for either the British or the American side of the American Revolution. When Angie asked Eve which side she wished to represent, Eve said that she didn't agree with either side. Why does there always have to be a right and a wrong side, she asked. Why can't both sides be right? Eve's final product for this assignment was a poster that read, "When you pick a side, we all lose." Which still hangs in our basement on the wall, by the way. At school, or when our families would get together to play games and somebody would suggest dividing into teams based on gender, Eve would say, Why is that always the way to decide? Why not some other method? I also remember a time when Eve objected to me killing a spider in our home. We live in a very old house prone to spiders. And when I went to dispatch one of them that had wandered into one of our sinks while we were away for the weekend, Eve protested, saying, "Why should something die just for being what it is?" Each of these instances make perfect sense in the context of Eve's gender dysphoria. And though we did take note that something was amiss, we understood she was sensitive and unique and had struggles with anxiety. We'd be lying if we claimed we anticipated one day she would tell us she was going to transition. Having a transgender child never occurred to us, not even once. So there, in the book, we kind of detail Eve's telling Angie in their conversation of telling her that she was transgender. So this is now her telling me. So a few months after Eve's conversation with Angie, we were at the dinner table waiting for Eve to join us. Meals never seem to be too high on Eve's priority list, so it is often a bit of a struggle to get her to the table with the rest of the family. This evening was no exception. When Eve arrived at the table, it was obvious that there was something distracting her. She kept looking at Angie with eyes that betrayed both dread and uncertainty. Angie broke the silence. "Mike, Eve has something to share with you." Eve's gaze at Angie intensified as if to say, "Do we have to do this now?" "What is it, sweetie?" I asked across the table. Eve held her gaze on Angie for a moment longer, then turned her attention to me. "I don't feel like a boy," she said. "I've never felt like a boy at any point in my entire life." She paused, gauging my response, likely expecting the worst. "Tell me more," I said. "I have always felt like a girl, and I don't want to be a boy." I looked at Angie, who was now holding Eve's hand and looking into her eyes with a gaze of both kindness and support. "Tell me what that looks like to you," I asked. "Pronouns," Eve replied after a lengthy pause. "What about them?" I asked. "I want to go by she, not he," she added. "Okay," I said. "I'm sure you have given this lots of thought, and this cannot have been easy for you. However, I'm concerned that this might just be a fad, and you will change your mind someday down the road."
Not his best moment.
Not his best moment, yeah. Eve looked at Angie in that way that kids do when they are exasperated by something usually a parent has said or done. "Dad," she said, "this isn't a fad. This is who I am." With those words, something clicked in my head. Suddenly, all of the little clues, like pieces of a puzzle, began to form a picture in my mind, a picture of a reality I was now only being given access to. And I'm going to stop there because it goes on to something you don't know about yet. So, yeah.
Okay,
Sorry about that. I forgot that.
keep going.
Ended
Okay.
roughly.
Okay, so our book, the first chapter is about telling our immediate family, and then the next chapter is about telling our broader family. So we kind of started with telling the story with just our family, and then getting a little broader with the rest of our family, and then our church family and community and that sort of thing. So, okay. Processing a new awareness of oneself is one thing. Telling others about it, a whole other thing. One full of fear and uncertainty, especially if it involves your child. Is this your own story to tell, or do you let them tell it? Is that too much to put on your child? Is this the natural consequence of their decision? Is it like having a new diagnosis of a chronic disease, like diabetes or cancer? How would I approach that situation with family members, since we are fortunate to not have that history? In asking Eve how she wanted to proceed, the answer was clear that she did not want to be the one to share her news with other family members. The fear of the potential rejection was too great. She had already dealt with that in the reveal to our immediate family. Now she hoped we could help her take the next steps alongside her, rather than having to proceed alone. Angie and I know a thing or two about growing up with fear and uncertainty hanging over us. We were both raised in families that were active members of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here. Because of this background, we were a bit uncertain and maybe even fearful about sharing Eve's story with those outside of our close family ties. Even telling those within our family posed a significant risk. What if our parents refused to accept Eve? What if they not only couldn't accept Eve, but reactively blamed us, the progressive rebels, for turning her. How would we explain to them that transgender kids are who they are and do not become so through indoctrination or grooming, as they likely had heard through their social media contacts and news outlets? This accusation never made any sense to us, as we have never micromanaged our kids' lives. We have concluded that those who make such accusations do so because they don't allow their kids to make any decisions on their own. So any decisions their kids make will naturally come from the demands of their parents. This is the only way that argument makes any sense to us. And then, let's see. I don't remember why I have that one. Maybe I'll just wait that. Okay. The next section is about telling our church family. Sorry, I don't have the book memorized.
Yeah.
So we had at this point told our families, I believe, and our circle of support was wide and staying strong so far. To be clear, there were people in our church who could not and would not accept Eve for who she was, but they were people with whom we were not especially close, and we wouldn't be one bit affected by their lack of acceptance, except for one person, our pastor. He had not been present at our prior small group meeting when we shared about Eve's name change. So on another evening, after our discussion, when people had gathered their food, put on their shirts, not their shirts.
It's a wild group.
Their shoes. Put on their shoes and coats to leave, and I pulled our pastor away from the others into our entryway. I understood that this conversation may be more difficult than the one with our group had been. I knew him to be a man who took pride in his position of authority and rarely questioned his own intuition on weighty matters. I couldn't recall any instances in our group discussions where he had expressed agreement with ideas or beliefs outside of those he already personally held. On the contrary, he spent most of his time trying to convince others that his belief on any given topic was the correct one. He seemed to believe he possessed the right answer, no matter the question, so this would not likely be an easy conversation. I shared with him that our youngest child was experiencing gender dysphoria and would now be going by the name Eve. He lowered his head and dropped his voice an octave, as he often did when he wanted to portray authority. Many kids can change their minds over time about gender identity, he said. You know, there was a time in college when a friend of mine questioned her sexuality, he added, but she grew out of it. I stared at him in disbelief. Was he really equating gender dysphoria with a passing uncertainty about sexual attraction? Did he even understand what gender dysphoria was? Did he even want to understand? I mean, you and Mike know the science much better than I do, but every cell in that body is screaming male, he offered. That may be true, I replied, but Eve's brain is screaming female, and her brain has the power to kill the body in cases like this where they may not agree. I then shared the statistics on the suicide rate among transgender teens who do not have the support of their families and surrounding community members. I didn't tell you this to ask for your opinion, I said. We just wanted you to know what was going on in our family.
The next part's really good. So
So you have to get the book to
Yeah.
read it.
no spoiler alert.
Okay. Let's see. I think the others. So how are we with time? What do you want to?
I'll turn on this mic.
Okay. And then we've got.
So just.
Does anyone have any questions, comments, anything so far? We have a microphone right there, and if somebody wants to, should we not offer it to somebody to pass it around? Jim, pass it around.
I have a question. How old was he when you had this?
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Trans joy is resistance. Trans joy is community. Trans joy is here with our weekly social support group. Join us for a welcoming and affirming space where trans, non-binary, and gender diverse individuals can connect, share, and support one another. We will have peer-led discussions, social connection, and mutual support in a space where you can be heard, celebrated, and uplifted. No RSVP needed, just show up and be you. We'll gather every Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m. at Roots Market. For more info, click on the link in our show notes.
I should know this off the top of my head, but I always have to do the math. Yeah, so, yeah, she was 13. Yeah.
That's an excellent question. We should have included that. Sorry.
Yeah. Did we not include that in the book?
It's in the book,
Oh,
but I didn't write
Okay,
it.
but thank you for, yeah.
Any other questions?
We'll take some notes for the next edition.
I'm just curious, and this may be an unfair question, but you talk a lot about the pushback and things that might read the book. It's just like, horrified, depressed, whatever, but having been down at the state house return session, probably I shouldn't have been, but in those conversations, I find the pushback that your family and others receive, someone is family from a libertarian and others. I haven't quite figured out what fear is it. And I believe it's fear. What is it that's driving them to be so resistant to being accepted? And I don't know if it's truth or whatever, but I'm just curious. And there may be multiple that you guys have faced this for years.
Yeah.
But that's what Boise's counseling is, the fear and the hate. What's driving that?
Okay. Excellent question, Wayne. So just give me 3 minutes. So the deal is,
We have a section in the book we could read.
this is more detailed than what's in the book. So there are people in our country right now who sadly have a lot of power. And they basically align with the white Christian nationalists, the NAR movement, if you know what that means. But Russ Vogt, who's going to be the new OMB director, he's like super high up on this, and Project 2025 is all about this. But the fear, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, is that, okay, hang on to your shorts. Time is running out on America because the American dream has never been allowed to be fulfilled. Because what you and I know as America and love about America is a distortion. America will only be America when Jesus is the head of the government. So they believe that people like Eve and other family members in the LGBT community, their biggest sin is that they cannot reproduce white babies. That's what they want. That's why they're going to get rid of birth control. That's why they want women in the house. They want white women producing white babies. So Eve is a threat to them because Eve can't reproduce in the way that they want. And I know that sounds crazy, but Google Russ Vogt, and I think I nailed it. Like, it's bad and it's weird and it's freaky, but that's what it is. It has nothing to do with, them going into women's bathrooms to, all of that, total smokescreen. And by the way, if you notice, the people who are actually getting caught for pedophilia are not transgender people. So.
And maybe assuming that you raised it in a conservative context, but I heard you hint at being Seventh-day Adventist. I'm curious, what have you found space to continue a spiritual path, or what does that look like as parents and creating, I don't know, a new belief system or
I love that question. Thank you.
New system? Something system. Okay, all right. The reason he handed this to me is because he does not have a spiritual, what would we say, belief anymore? Yeah. Yeah, and I think everybody's individual, right, with that. So I don't, if anyone's read the book, we grew up in different types of households, both though within that church. So within any religion, you see, some diversity about that approach, right? So my family, I always said, was kind of one foot in, one foot out. His was definitely more in the center of that. And so I feel like my faith was less about the church specifically. So I have found, thanks to some friends who are here tonight, even just, lots of ways of finding the mystery of spirituality, and that it's so much about love and loving people for who they are, and with some online New York City church groups that I can be a part of if I'm there or if I'm not there, and just books and getting together with friends. That is part of my life.
So I would add, if you have read the book, Our Small Group, there's a number of those people who are here tonight, and they've kind of allowed, I think, both of us to stay attached to the community element of that in a deep and meaningful way. So they're very important to us. So thank you for that question. That was good.
Yeah. I would say our kids, and again in our book, and I think it's just so typical, 13, 14, they're just like, we don't want anything to do with us, other than the people in the church, they're part of their family, right? And so, and the people that have continued to be part of our small group are definitely part of the family, not the pastor. But Eve was down in Twin Falls visiting some friends this summer, or in the fall, I guess. And she was like, oh, I'm in this park. It's a Sunday. There's a Universalist church. And she went in there. She's like, this is awesome. So she just embraces that more. Isabel's definitely not into that.
Out of curiosity, at the time, how did it disclose this to you? How did she react to the concept of maybe her church family not being as accepting? Did it affect her coming out at all, or her conversations with you guys? Did she share any of that with you?
Oh, that's a really good question. Eve was super fortunate in that at the time that she was still attending church, the youth group that she was a part of was really outstanding. And I don't see Alan here. One of the instructors is in our small group too. And that was really, really great. But that group got usurped by the pastor. And so then it went from being a discussion group to a give me the right answer group. So Eve kind of had already left by then. Also, though, all of her friends were just like, who cares? Totally fine. So the support was there. It was just no longer in the church building.
Yeah, but the small group that we had, we had a lot of friends that were LGBTQ friends, and just people that just knew her and loved her and knew this was who she was, and they were within our church. So there were a lot of people that were very accepting and loving.
I'm curious about what your journey was like as parents, learning more about being transgender, what that is, like, from the starting point to getting full acceptance.
That's a great question. Mine was really awful, actually. At the time, and we didn't mention this in the book, but we had there was another family actually at our church, who they had a transgender son, and our kids were about the same age. And so they were very close, and we would do a lot of stuff with them. And she was from the mother was from a very conservative country in Europe. And so having a mini-me daughter was really important to her. So when Gabe transitioned, she was just like not having any of it. And my less than shining parental moment was I'm not even going to say that. She and I kind of pooled our ignorance quite often. And we were both, for a brief period of time, convinced that somebody online was influencing our kids to do this. This just wasn't this was not who we knew our kids to be. So for obvious reasons, I didn't put that in the book because it makes me look like a schmuck. But for a while, I did kind of feel like, what in the world? We would go to our cabin in McCall, and she and I would just commiserate and wind each other up. And it was really stupid in retrospect.
I usually take the scientific approach to most things. There was a point that we talked about in the book again, that like a lot of people that we knew would say, "Oh, I thought he was gay," and since she was young, and I'd say, "Okay, a 5-year-old is not. We're not talking about attraction. We're talking about who she is. Like what you're talking about is who she is. It's her qualities that you saw." So I had less of a like, this is who she is approach. I just thought she is who she is, and that's kind of how I came to it. But as soon as she told me, I started researching, and the first thing I saw was the suicide rate of people who aren't accepted by at least one person. So I'm a physician, and I thought about my patients too. I thought, like, as a physician, we have to be a safe person. If people can tell one person that they're not even in the family, it decreases that suicide rate. If they have a family that accepts them, that rate goes down to pretty similar to teenagers, all teenagers, which is horribly bad as well. But so, and then I just continued to learn, go to conferences, read, do all of that. And that was my approach. Did that answer your question?
So, I found out that I was trans when I was in my 30s, but my question is, since she found out when she was younger, did she deal with any kind of body dysmorphia or anything similar to that? Because I feel like that's a pretty common thing in the trans community, and I feel like as somebody who has a developmental disability as well, that's also a common thing. So I feel like I'm wondering if she ever did deal with any body dysmorphia when she was growing up or now, and what that looks like throughout her life.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question. Well, I mean, first of all, we all know that we are not a monolith, so everybody's different, right? This is just her story, and a lot of people, by the way, will say, "What does she think of us writing this book?" And she gets so sick of me asking her that over and over. She's like, "I told you, it's fine." Still, she's my daughter, so she acts that way. Yeah, well, I think for most, well, I shouldn't say for most, for a lot of people with gender dysphoria, when their body is prepubertal, there's not a lot of difference on to anybody looking, right? It's easier to be who you are with your haircut or your clothes or whatever. And so I think for a lot of people that dysphoria really heightens as you start to go through puberty. And that was when we became, which she decided to tell us. So yes, there definitely was gender dysphoria. I think if you're not allowed to be who you are, that just really worsens, right? And, so many times I think we hear, and I've heard Eve talk about this as well, that, if you can't allow someone to have gender affirming care and to be who they are, obviously we already talked about suicide rates are really high. But the privilege of being able to actually transition through as you go through puberty is just much more natural. You don't achieve a height of a gender that you're not wanting to be, or that you weren't, I guess. There's just a lot more that you don't have to reverse. Like people that say, I don't want my kid to have gender affirming care as a teenager are really subjecting their children to having more surgery, to having a lot more trauma. And that does not get talked about enough, in my opinion.
Great question.
I have a question about any moments of unexpected joy that came about that you just maybe not expected.
If you don't have anything, I do.
Yeah, go.
Oh, how about just 2 events? That's what I was going to say. But
yeah. So I don't want to spoil anything, so this is not a real. But Eve and I went to New York City when she was looking at colleges, and so we were staying. Our travel agent's kind of a low budget travel agent, and so we were staying in, where were we? We were in Harlem, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, we were in Harlem. 2 white people from Idaho. It was great. But Eve has a thing about New York style pizza, and so we on the back of the book, she's got this flowy white thing she was wearing, and she was wearing that and fishnet, hose and boots and shorts and this thing and the whole, and the sunglasses in there, the whole look. She had the whole thing going.
Makeup.
Yeah,
she's
and the
got
eye
quite
makeup.
an eye makeup game.
And so we went out to busy street and just crazy, and people saying inappropriate things to women, and it was just like, oh my gosh, can we really? If she ends up coming here, is this going to work? And I just kind of sat back and watched, and she had this strut about her that was just like, don't mess with me, I'm at home. And that was that, it was exactly what you're asking. It was just this moment of joy and shock and everything, all the emotions at once. But yeah, that was a really good one.
This is less about Eve and more about just the community. So coming from a background of fairly conservative church, there was a lot of inauthenticity, as you often see within religions. A lot of, this, I have to be a certain way. Again, I had less of that. My mother is exceedingly authentic and just say whatever the hell she wants. And I love that about her. And so coming from that background, though, is just the authenticity of people who have had to struggle to figure out who they are, or I should say, I mean, I think a lot of people know who they are. I think it's feeling safe to tell people and to be that person. And so that is just, I love being being a part of the Trans Joy community because there's a lot of joy.
Is there an instance you can think of where someone did a real face, and what was it that changed? Didn't have their mind or seemed even more able to accept the.
Are you asking that? You can clarify.
I am sure that we have those stories, Frank. I can't think of one right now, but I do want to share one that I saw this week that was amazing. I don't know what part of the country it was in, probably the South, could have been Idaho. There was an anti-trans bill coming up, and there was an older gentleman who just was like straight out of central casting. I mean, this dude was exactly what you'd expect. And he stepped up to the microphone and he said, I came here tonight to speak in favor of this bill that was an anti-trans bill. And he said, but in waiting to testify, I've met all these people back here. And he said, they're great. And he said, I'm going to change and he said, I'm sorry, but I'm changing. I'm actually against the bill. And I think we should leave these people the hell alone. So, like, amazing. And, maybe that's happened close to us. Nobody has said anything, but, it's out there and it's catching and it's cool.
Knowing that you mentioned Eve was about 13 at the beginning of the book, and presumably dependent on you all for transportation and things like that, how were you all able to either seek out and build or find a community for Eve of other trans kids?
Mm-hmm.
Eve went to Boise High. So,
Gabe.
Yeah, and we had the aforementioned Gabe, our family friend. And she was also like the president or something of the GSA club at North. And then online. I know it sounds kind of weird, and yes, we are good parents, sort of. But I think
that's what kids do.
Yeah, that's what kids do, right? But Boise High, I just cannot say enough about that. I mean, just tremendous.
She also went to a TVMSC, which is a Treasure Valley Math and Science for a while. Did not go well during the pandemic. And her principal there was interesting. I don't think she's here tonight, so I can probably talk about her. She was so interesting. Man, we would go to some of the initial and beginning of the year meetings, and oh my gosh, would she go on and on about stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, where does she think these smart kids come from? I think she can go a little faster with her information. We were just all so like, oh my gosh, so boring. But I went to her at the beginning of 8th grade, I guess it was, and said, here's the deal. This is Eve, and she's changed her name, and she wants to use the female bathrooms. And we had gone she also went to North, so it was sort of a shared school year day, in fact. And so at North, the counselor we met with was like, hey, we've got the nurse's bathroom. And Eve was like, okay. And I was like, much cleaner than the other bathroom. It totally is. But at TVMSC, the principal was like, okay, yeah, she can use the girls' bathroom. She's like, there's stalls. If anyone is concerned about what's going on in those stalls, they need to talk to me anyway. So she was like all over supporting her, and it was awesome.
I had a question about I oftentimes hear parents or maybe family members of folks with trans talk about mourning the loss of the person that they knew. But riding kind of a little bit to what you've alluded to before, can you tell us about what you gained in this year?
Yeah, we gained a kid who is living authentically. Yeah, that's a really great question. I'll piggyback off that briefly. I've had people ask me this because, I lost a son, which we say in the book, like, even I never really, like, we'd go fishing and, she's like, what happens to the fish when you catch it? Well, we may take it home and eat it. Well, let's go back. I don't want to do that. And, we catch grasshoppers down by Jim and Jen's house. And she's like, why are you catching these? He says, well, we're going to put them on a hook. And she's like, let's just let them go. We have food in the refrigerator. So, none of that. But there was a time, one evening where we went downstairs and we're talking to Eve. And normally, the downstairs, it's like one of us will go down there and then, you come back up and you do a debriefing, how is everything? Is anything burning? That kind of thing. And, but both of us went down there for some goofy reason. And we were talking with Eve and he was very kind of impatient, like kids are, right? Like, get out of my room. I'm, whatever. And so we were there for a long time. And then finally she went to bed and, we went upstairs. Years later, she told us she was planning on killing herself that night. So we gained a daughter.
Yeah. We talked about, we have people we know that I think mourn death more, the loss of this child that they thought they had, I guess. And there's a quote that we need to raise the children we have, not the ones we want. And I think that, I do, as a family physician, I've seen a lot of people over the years that are pregnant, and a lot of people are like, oh, I have a boy. I'm so excited. I'm pregnant and I have a girl. And I never felt that. I never did. And I think some people are just a lot more attached to that gender of that child. And so then I think they mourn it more, and I was lucky. I never was like, I want a healthy child and I want a happy child. And, I think that is easier when that's your approach. And some people are much more attached to that gender.
Hi. I have a transgender daughter, Leah. And we are so absolutely proud of her. She's was a girl for really since she was about 3 or 4 years old. And there was lots of signs. So I am so happy that Eve's experience through school, and the teachers and principals were supportive. Unfortunately, that has not really been our experience. It's been difficult. And I think the schools more so want to stick with the laws, with the bathrooms, and they don't want to be, and I don't want Leah to be the poster child for, bathroom use at Answer. And Answer is supposed to be kind of a woke school, right? And it's been difficult. I've been called a hyper parent first, trying to stick up for her. And I'm just an advocate for my child, just like any other parent would be. But my question for Leah really is, she is so proud of who she is. And she knows she's amazing, and she likes to share that she's trans with her community. And with the current political climate, I've always encouraged her, and I've said, yes, absolutely, we'll stand right behind you. But with this political climate where we are, it's like also really important that we keep our bodies safe. And so it's like, well, maybe this year we just don't really talk about it so loudly with people we don't really know if they're supportive or not. And that's really hurt her. And she calls it her little gut feeling that this just feels bad because she can't be her authentic self. And so that's been difficult to navigate. And I think we kind of the conclusion, you share whatever you want to share, and Mommy will deal with everything else. So I'm just wondering if that's kind of the right approach to this in Idaho. I know we're in Boise, so there's so much kind of serious.
Yeah.
Well, first off, thank you. And Leah, we're proud of you. Way to go. Good job. You know, I think you've probably done her a tremendous service just by showing her that, you know, there are things about you and things that you know and things that you say that are not going to be popular and people aren't going to like. And that's not going to end, you know, in a couple of years. That's the rest of your life. And so it's a harsh lesson to learn at that age. None of us had to learn it in the same way. But you know what? I don't understand why we aren't celebrating these kids and raising them up, because the courage and the strength and depth of character, like, that's always the right thing. So be you always. Always. Be safe, but always be you.
I was reading Jennifer Finney Boylan. I don't know if people know her book, and her, I can't remember the name of the first one that she wrote, but it was, I think, after she first transitioned, so it was like 20-some years ago. But she has this wonderful relationship with this friend, and they kind of talked. There was a lot of kind of back and forth, but the friend had this great comment about, like, what's between your ears is so much important than what's between your legs. And it's just like, people get real. Like, we want kind children, and we want children that are authentic. Just like, I know with Eve, and I'm just kind of the way in life that I'm just like I said to the pastor, like, I'm not asking for your agreement or your permission. I'm just telling you, this is what's happening. This is my child, and she is who she is, and you can get out of our lives if you want.
We're going to shift to some Monday. We're going to join you, Pacey and myself, and we're going to just continue the conversation. I know there's a couple more questions, so we'll get to you as well. We'll just shift a little bit. Hope that feels okay for everyone.
These are great questions, by the way.
Yeah. One thing that I admittedly hadn't thought about as a trans person was how difficult it would be for family members, parents, to tell other people, because it's this huge deal when you're a trans person to come out to people. It takes so much courage, and you have to really figure out who you are. So when I was reading the process that you went through when you were telling your own parents, that was really fascinating to me, and I would just love to hear more.
Oh. No, go ahead.
We were super lucky. I mean, we know that. My mother has since passed away, and my father died previously, but her husband, who she was married to after my father died, they were great. They were totally great. I mean, zero pushback. Questions, appropriate questions, but zero pushback, and they were great. And Angie's parents, the same. Angie's mom, being the inquisitive person that she is, asked 25,000 questions, and then asked those same 25,000 questions, so they're 5 more times. But that's good, because, you know, this is a process that she was, you know, kind of sharing with us, her process of kind of working this through. We are incredibly fortunate because we didn't have anybody push back, anybody in our family, and that is rare. So in a lot of ways, our story ain't no typical story.
Yeah.
But I would say that I think that people surprise you, you know? So when you just are like, this is who I am. Love me or leave me. Love me or leave my child. We're not backing down. A lot of people are great.
Yeah, I think oftentimes, I oftentimes expect the worst response and really happy to get the better or the more comfortable response, I guess, the response you're looking for. For folks who haven't read the book, it's really great for one. That's, I think, goes without saying, but it really goes through the chronologically, Eve, kind of coming of age and joining the family in her story as a trans girl. And they do go through a lot of like the different relational dynamics of things around politics and church and family and friends and even like doing news things and legislature. And so I think there's a lot of really rich information in there for folks if you are in any of those arenas. I know looking at why some folks are coming, that you are all coming from a lot of different stages. So I think the book really covers a lot of the area. And one of the things that I think often happens when we're, I think sometimes trans people can get so defensive when it comes to like language. And again, like I can find myself sometimes assuming that somebody dislikes me first, instead of assuming the best, to assume the worst. And so one of the things in your book did that to me. And we've talked about it on the site, but you guys used the word transgender a few times. And the first time I heard it, I was like, and then there was quite a few times about it. And I know you guys and I've known you for some time, and so it was quite this like feeling of like, ooh, that's not a word that I like or that I use. I feel like it's a word that's been used to harm my community, either by religious people or spiritual people or medical people. So my first thought was like, I wanted to talk a little bit about your choice in that word and your understanding of that word. And I think just in general, I think the take home for me was really to not, again, make assumptions. And I love that I had a relationship with you already. So I wasn't just like, even though it kind of was a little bit at first, every time I read it, I was like, oh, you can do this, And it's a really great book. There's a lot of really great information. And that word, for whatever reason, really gets, I think it's just my own.
We can have another question.
Thank you for your honesty. And I apologize. That's mine. I put that word in there. That's all on me. So if that offends anybody, I'm sorry. Totally sorry. Words carry different freight for different people. And what I was trying to, we were discussing, it's like, it's an attribute like athleticism or cynicism. Optimism, cynicism. So we were. So that's why it was in there, and I had zero idea. So this is actually really great. People come up to us all the time. I read your book. I've learned a lot. I learned a lot after reading my own book, which is kind of cool. So I appreciate you sharing that. But it was literally just an attribute, and it was just a really stupid mistake.
No, it's not. I wouldn't call it a mistake. I think it lends to us being in conversation with people about the words they're choosing to use and why they're using them. I think your decision to use the word or even like using the word is not an issue. I think it was just something that I wrestled with as I read the book a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't use that word.
Yeah. There's a question out there.
Could you explain more what that?
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah. So transgenderism, my understanding was it was a term that was used by people who were conservative Christians mostly, and a term that was used around trying to convert somebody from their transgenderism. So like my understanding of the isms were like racism or alcoholism, or like it was, like it was ism that was in a different limelight. It was a diagnosis, it was a disease, it was an ailment of some sort, and not as an attribute, which makes sense to what you all were saying. But I think just because I have a lot of my own spiritual trauma, I'd say one of my biggest challenges has been my spirituality with my transness, even though I believe my living into my transness is a spiritual awakening. So I think for me, it was just one of those words that I heard from people who were nice to people like me
And so I just kind of took it as one of those words. It's kind of like the word homosexual is not a term that many gay people refer to themselves, but oftentimes people will refer to gay men and women as homosexual, and that's maybe more of a clinical term or
Right.
than like a human term, I guess. So again, some words have been used to harm us in other ways, and I feel like we've gotten past that. So again, that's why language I think is so important to not just take it for what it is, but to actually have a conversation about like why we chose that, or why that's
I know when Eve was reading the book, she's like, you have like transgender male and transgender female, and she's like, that is just weird. And I said, well, it's medical. Like that's what we do in medicine. Like we all use terms that you think are weird. Sorry.
I think it's really powerful that, like, especially in the state of Idaho, that you are such vocal advocates for the trans community, and you have such a history in your religion. And I think that is going to be really effective in reaching people that we could never reach, and the fact that you're using that privilege really to reach those people means so much. And also, I think that it's just great that your professions, like you're coming at this scientifically. So when people would tell you things, you'd be like, they'd say, oh, well, I read this on the internet. You'd be like, well, you didn't read that in a peer-reviewed journal. And I'm like, amazing, that's exactly what we need right now. But I think that unfortunately, you can read just how upsetting it was that you had to leave the church. And there was one quote that I particularly loved, but it was becoming increasingly clear that there was an insidious rift developing in our church community regarding the nature of reality. And I read that a couple times because wow. And I just kind of wanted to hear a little bit more, maybe just on that perspective coming from, medical backgrounds and dealing with people in that regard, and just how this all affected your church, like your relationship with your church. Wait, you have one?
You want to talk?
I was super proud of that line, so I'm glad you thought it. Sometimes these things just come to you, so. She's taking credit for it now. Whatever. I read it. Yeah. So I think one of the things that this has really been kind of eye-opening for me is that so much of what we as individuals hold to be true and unquestionable and foundational is really based upon things we believe and we've been told. And while there's tremendous room for belief and faith, when it comes to applying that reality to someone else, I think we need to tread really lightly. And so for me, that kind of certainty that we were wrong and that, there's only two gender, whatever, that you're welcome to believe that. That's totally fine, but you don't have our permission to make us live by that. And that's where, for me, it became kind of a thing. And again, I dearly love these people back here who we still are in spiritual community with, but I could not be a part of that church anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But they aren't either.
Right. Right. I'm so sorry. Yeah, we all. So.
They also
and when they write a book, they'll tell their
reality.
Story.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, the context of our story, as most of us in the room were here 5 years ago, with the pandemic. I think it just, Warren Buffett said, when the tide goes out, you see who's swimming naked. And that's what the pandemic did. It's like, what? These people believe this crazy stuff. So it was kind of in this whole mess of, you know, a different reality. And that was really, to me, eye-opening about like, oh, these people get their information from different sources than I do. And we're going to agree to disagree completely on a lot of things. And I think in a way it maybe, you know, made it easier to just be like, there's a lot of things we disagree on. And yeah.
I have a question about, so the book is written from Michael's point of view, and I know that it's not like Michael's book, you know, like Mike's not necessarily write it all on his own. I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of, I guess, tell me more about like why you chose that, and was Eve involved as well?
No.
Well,
So
I mean, she
one
did.
of the publishers that we, you know, shipped this thing out to, it's very odd. They emailed me back and said, "Why didn't Eve write this book?" And it's like, because this isn't Eve's book. That's not what this book is. You know, this is about parenting Eve. You know, this is our perspective. So right, which is a very strange thing. Anyhow, what was your question? It was a good one.
Why you chose
Oh
to
yes.
speak
So
to
I initially wrote like a 90-page version of this book that was kind of it was a mess, and so but it was, you know, I thought it was great. So she read it and she's like, So we had Alan Heathcock, who helped us write the book, is a friend of ours, and he's a, you know, published author in Obama's list and all that stuff. So
Teaches.
and he teaches, and he has a company that helps people write books who wouldn't, you know, don't normally do that kind of thing. So we paid him some money to read it, and he read it, and he said, and we met with him, and he said, "There's a story here, but this isn't it," and which is good. That's a good thing. And so he was the one who said, "Here's how we're going to lay this out. You know, we're going to Eve coming up to Angie, the family, the larger family, the church, the community, that whole thing." So the way it was formulated was that way. The fact of the matter is, it's in my voice largely because I have more time than she does. Like, she's really busy. And so we both wrote, you know, I would start and then I would give it to her and she would add her stuff. Then we'd give it to Alan and we'd take his notes and we'd make the, you know, kind of blend all of that. And then we would meet with Alan and then he would give us our feedback from that, where we go next, and then we go next. So this is like an 18-month process of meeting with him every 4 to 6 weeks. But there was equal contribution. It was just mine. I could sit down and write for 5 hours, and she can sit down and write for 15 minutes, you know, 15 times. So that's it. We kind of tried to say, you know, we've read books where they go, "This is Mike, this is Angie." It's awful. Your brain is like, who cares? Just tell me the story. So that's why we did it this way. But we put a little author's note in there saying, here's why it was written this way. It's not my story. It's our story. It's just kind of the way we did it, just to make it a little more readable. What? Oh, right. How did that come up? Yeah, go for it.
My mom, who's no longer with us, she was like, why is this in Mike's voice? Why isn't it in your voice? That's such a mom thing to say. Yeah. And so I was explaining all this stuff. And then one day Mike comes home from work. We were both at home. He apparently listened to We Can Do Hard Things podcast. And he's like, "Thanks, Liz." And he was like, "I was listening to this podcast today. Apparently I'm needy." And I'm sitting behind him. He's like getting dinner ready or something. And I'm off to the side and he's talking. And he's like, "Did you know that about me?" So Mike's needier. That's why it's
That's a great answer. For me, I have a lot of daddy issues. My father doesn't talk to me at all. So I think for me personally, knowing that it was the father of a trans girl's voice, for whatever reason, I think spoke to a part of me that I felt was, it may be like a less
thought to be response. You know, I mean, like,
Yeah.
you weren't like perfect about it, but I think the fact that you were like, but that's okay too. But I don't know, I think for me, it just, the fact that it was from a father's perspective, knowing that mom was there too, was really, I don't know, it was just really nice.
I'd just like to add to that really quick. If you haven't read the book, you really put yourself in front of a lot of bad publicity, and you kind of became a target for a lot of these attacks, like people calling you a pedophile, all of these things. And I thought, just adding on to what Bonnie Violet was saying, that's amazing that you both were willing to do that, but particularly you so publicly to kind of shield your daughter and be the brunt of all of this ignorance and hatred.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we tell people, you know, we got nothing else to do, so we're in the fight. Like, you picked the wrong couple because we got time on our hands. So, and we're not. I have time on my hands.
I was curious if you would tell us a little bit about what your experience was having Eve tell you first, and you having known it a little while before talking with Mike. And how was that for you?
It's a mom thing.
Yeah, what did you say?
It's a mom thing.
It's a mom thing.
Yeah.
It's a mom
It's
thing.
a mom
Yeah.
thing.
So, you know, nothing occurs right out of the blue, right? So this is a child who's anxious and was struggling to get her schoolwork done, which still happened after she transitioned, by the way. But you know, we were like, she's just having a lot of difficulty just dealing with life. I mean, she was like with the whole haircut thing and all this stuff. She was just anxious. And when she was 5, she'd be like, I'm afraid to die at night, every night. And yeah, and she was just very anxious. So at some point we, you know, started kind of trying to figure out how to help her. And so she was going to some counseling. We were doing some family counseling. We said it was instead of our children having any sports activities, we were just doing family counseling. So you know, so Mike knew there was stuff going on with her. And then she was very tiny. This is all in the book. And so as she started into puberty, I thought, we should probably make sure she doesn't have like a growth hormone deficiency or something else going on. So we went to a pediatric endocrinologist, and that was the story. But, you know, he knew all of this was happening. I was doing it all. But so when she told me, which happened in McCall at a coffee shop, and she was like, Mom, I want to go to coffee with you today. And so we went, and he knew that. But, you know, after she said, I don't feel like a boy. And I said, okay, what does that mean to you? Then I said, okay, are we telling other people? Are we telling your dad what's happening? And she's like, no, I'm not ready yet. And so I said, okay, well, I'll keep asking you. And, you know, that reading at the dinner table was after a lot of like, every week. Okay, how are you feeling about telling me this? You know, so I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, you totally answered it. And I just love that you both like use she pronouns.
Oh, yeah.
She's always been.
Yeah. That didn't happen overnight. Yeah, we had a lot of times that she was pissed at us. Yeah.
Yeah, I especially had a really bad moment. We were in Las Vegas waiting in line at the roller coaster in New York. And I was telling my coworkers, who were all down there, a story of when Eve was younger. And I misgendered her because, and, you know, she freaked out. It's like, what's your problem? You know, and like, that's who you were then. Oh, yeah, that's the proper thing to say. So yeah, that was really stupid of me. And so when you make a mistake like that, it tends to kind of, you know, filter your thoughts more effectively. So I never made that mistake again, but I just did not make a mistake. I don't even think of her birth name. I don't run it through my head. I don't look at it. I don't anything just because I don't want to say it, because I don't want to hurt her.
But I think it's such a process. It just takes time. I remember a friend who long ago changed his name, which I don't really know why, because it was kind of a gender neutral name before, and then it was still a gender neutral name, so I didn't get it. But I said, I'm never going to remember your name. And then like 10 years later, I was like, wait, what was your name? I can't even remember it, right? And I think it's just a process. Yeah.
I think it's really cool how in the book you never say her dead name. Like, I thought that was such a unique take and so respectful that I was really surprised by it. And because I wouldn't even think to do that, and so I really commend you for that. That was really cool. One thing that I struggle with,
I was just going to say, she did read this. Like, I was under duress. Like, we're publishing and we'd really want you to read this, but because that's her, she doesn't do anything if it isn't under duress, but except transitioning, by the way. But anyway.
One thing that I've been struggling with a lot just personally is dealing with being so angry with the people that just come at you with nothing but ignorance and bigotry. And there's a quote in here that I really liked that said, "Let's not make understanding a prerequisite for loving people and allowing people to live the lives they feel led to live." And I know that in this context, you're saying this to other people, that are being ignorant, but I really am trying to apply it to my own life to see the people that are ignorant or hateful of me, because my knee-jerk reaction is to just get furious and get mad. But I know that that's not who I am, and I want to be someone who can also show compassion and understanding, because I feel like there are still some people that are capable of having these conversations and kind of bridging these gaps. So I just really like that quote a lot.
So how do you manage that?
So Mike is amazing with a microphone, by the way. And in front of a camera, I take longer to think about what I want to say. But it's an amazing story of that quote or that statement. And he was interviewed by Jake Tapper, and he said he never thought of that before. It just came out, and it was amazing. I don't know if you want to say anything.
I know we had another question back here earlier. I didn't forget about you. What are we planning to do? Is you have your hand up? Okay. Please.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Do you have other children? Okay.
Yes.
Another daughter. And I'm just curious, what was her process? The transition.
Good question.
The family thing. Was she supportive? Did she struggle? Did she feel the loss of a brother? And
she did not feel the loss of a brother. She's has an interesting personality, and she like the moment she knew, she started calling Eve E, which was a really nice transition. It was something that so Eve's dead name also began with E, and E is really nice, by the way, because like he, she, E, like you could just be like, I'm just going with the E, because then I cannot not get things wrong. And so that, at least for me, was really helpful. But no, I think she was supportive from day one. I think it's been difficult. I think like when you are a sibling of somebody that has more attention paid to them, whether it's a chronic illness or something else, that's hard. She has a lot of jealousy. That's just part of who she is. So we try to deal with that. but it's not directly based on Eve being transgender. That's just who Isabel is, right? And but I think she's been incredibly supportive of Eve. And yeah, do you have anything else to say?
No, I mean, the one element I'm not sure we really brought out in the book, but Izzy was really into theater from a very young age. And Eve, like, never in a million years did I think Eve would even step on a stage, because just, because of the anxiety and just the whole thing. And, then Eve did, and like, she's amazing, and which is great. I mean, that she's in New York studying, theater. Oh, spoiler alert. Sorry. Oh, geez. Sorry. Anyhow, that I think bothers Izzy a little bit.
Yeah,
Because
probably more, yeah.
she chose not to study theater. She's studying archaeology, but she wanted to, Isabel did. And then just thought better of it. I think, good for her, because Izzy's amazing on stage, but she's like Al Pacino dark. And Eve is like, Carol Channing, like, amazing.
Or Glenda.
Sure.
Go, Linda.
There you go. So we're kind of glad that kind of diverged a little bit. But that is one thing I think that's kind of sticks in Izzy's craw a little bit, is that Eve gets to star in the musicals that she never got to. So.
But Isabel also got, she felt the tension with Eve and within the family. She is very intuitive and feels a lot, I think. And so I think when Eve came out of that and became who she was authentically, I think Isabel very much appreciated that.
Can I add something to that? One thing that I thought was really cute was when Isabel started to suspect that something was different with Eve. She asked Eve which letter for the LGBTQ thing, and Eve was like T, and that was how she told her sister. And that was so cute. That really stuck.
Instances when you are talking to people who don't have personal relationships with trans people in their own life, and their views are so fueled by hate, misinformation, fear, all these misplaced emotions, what are some of the tactics that you use in helping them understand the truth around it? I'm personally navigating this a lot with people in my life. It's challenging, and to the point you brought up earlier, it's so hard to not just get angry. It's why don't you get, where are you coming from? So anyways, that's a tough one.
So she'll give you a better answer, but just let me give you two things. So when people say, how many genders are there? Two things. I don't know, neither do you. And then you ask them, how many points are there on a line? Because a lot of people would say there's two, one at each end, ignoring what's in the middle. So that's a good one. The other thing is with all the transgender sports stuff, because these are not real issues, by the way, folks. They're just making this crap up, but it's something to hang their hat on. So they want people to believe, our governor and everybody else, that when it comes to testosterone, there's boys up here and girls down here. And the reality of it is, it's like this. There's overlap. There are women in this room who could kick my butt. And a lot of things that involve strength and whatever else. So another thing, co-ed volleyball, right? I'm so sick of hearing people say, "Oh my gosh, it's so dangerous for girls to play with boys when it comes to volleyball." I work with volleyball players who have been hit in the head, and it is bad. But you know who did it? Other girls. So we take Eve's approach, which I want to be mad at these people and tell them what you almost said, but Eve says, they just don't know. They're just uninformed. And so what I have found in my practice is people that I thought were never we're not talking about this because this is going to be a bad thing, were really open, which was kind of shocking. And then I also found I have 8 patients who have transgender kids, which they never told me, because a couple of them had, but like I wasn't safe or what have you. So give people a chance, be honest, but don't push. If they can't go there, just it's not worth it. Talk about something else.
I would also jump in and add that, like, I think, there are books we've written about our experiences, there are movies, there are plays that we're in, there are things that we do. And so maybe taking these folks to watch these shows or telling them about them or starting a book club with them or something. If folks are really open and really curious and want to really lean into it, I think those are some easy ways that you can kind of do it. And then it's us as trans people telling our stories instead of you feeling like you have to try to, teach it. And then people can see that there's a lot of different areas and different experiences for us as trans non-binary folks. Good question right here.
So, I became transgender when I was about 5 years old. And at school, everybody was asking like very uncomfortable questions. So I was like, it was really like hard for me because, and then when I went to another school and I was really excited because nobody would know because they would keep asking these questions. And then I was like, I want to tell people now. And it was a great opportunity, but then they put it in like in an email, and then nobody showed up. But well, some people, but then so then we had to move to answer, and I was happy. I was in kindergarten, but I was so happy because I got to go on the first grade, and then it's really great there, and I'm thinking to tell my class this year, and yeah.
Thank you. I would say that being transgender is a little part of who you are, who you're a beautiful person.
Thank you for sharing that. Any other questions from the audience? Oh, that's
Actually, my question's just a more specific version of hers. So when my kid came out, I am a science nerd, and the first thing I did is like read Scientific American, and all articles they have. What just happened? What did I do? It was in my womb. This is fascinating. I'm just wondering, as a doctor, and you said
Physical therapist.
You're a physical therapist. I mean, but you're a family practice doctor. So I'm more interested in Angie's answer.
Yes. I always am as well. It's fun.
I'm just curious. Do you have, for the science nerds, an elevator speech, Angie, that explains this is what happened in the womb and everything? I mean, there's theories, right?
Yeah.
Do you go there?
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think it. I've never heard a good explanation for that I would hang my hat on. Yeah, but yeah. People are complex. I don't think we can say there's one. No. I'd love to hear what you say.
I always say they don't really know what your brain develops from 6 to 8 weeks. And so whatever's going on in my life, I was flooding my child with female hormones during that period, most likely. But that they don't know this, right? But then later on, when the organs develop, I was flooding my kid with a different cocktail for whatever reason. And the way I think about it, it's kind of a miracle we're not all non-binary. It's just like we are all. I mean, literally. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, one thing I often say is I think I use you talked about online, but I kind of use the Barbie and Ken. Like there's Barbie and Ken, and then there's most people are in between, right? I mean, I'm not, there's a part at the very beginning where I was like, I'm not like those girls going to prom. Like I'm all sparkly like Bonnie Violet. I mean, this is amazing, but it's not mine. This is mine, right? So yeah, I just think, I mean, I was a tomboy growing up, and I think so much goes into it, and I think that the age at which you realize kind of who you are, I wondered if, like just me being a physician and a lot of people, and when we go places, well, I should say when Mike goes places without me and they maybe gay themed, all the guys are thinking about that cute guy and how well he dresses. So, he's not like bearded up and carrying his gun and stuff, right? So, I think everybody's different, right?
So it's a continuum. It's a bell
Yeah,
curve.
exactly.
And, when people say, boy, I would never want to have a transgender kid or a gay kid, then don't have kids. Because the reality is, when sperm meets egg, that is one possibility that can fall anywhere along that line. Just because the middle kind of third is what we're used to seeing, that is not normal. It's just more common. So, I mean, I love your explanation. It's great. And in 10 years, we'll think, wow, I can't believe we believe that. Who knows? But all I know is it's a possibility when sperm meets egg, as is everybody here, and where we fall on that spectrum. And why we've decided to draw a line around these elements and say they are somehow wrong is just beyond me.
And I can say so. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I get a little challenged by the questions around like the science and like the facts and stuff, because I'm like I am, so I think like there's trans people, like period, and so for me, like, are they happy? Are they living into who they feel like they are right now? Like, to me, those are like the questions I would give to hoops about. You know what I mean? Not to like disregard, but sometimes I feel like it's either one or the other. And so I think that's just thinking my position.
Question and also a comment, because as a physician myself, I think a awakening that I've been reckoning with in medical school is also the framing of so much of what we know in medicine came from cis-het white men who were experimenting on people and had a very specific vision for what they thought, science and appropriate experimentation was. And so I really struggle with that when people talk about the science or the medicine and the history of it, because I think you have been misled by who was writing those history books. And we were
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I can help myself. Just be dropping So this is a vision. I agree. I also point out how much this is a colonized mindset. Right, our family's Asian, and when places like India started to recognize that their gender, there were a lot of people writing about, look at India catching up with the times. But if you actually ask Indians, this is India decolonized.
Mm-hmm.
We've had it long before colonizers arrived. And so this idea of permeating medicine is being framed in this system.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments or about?
Oh,
There's one over here.
Rachel.
Stop hurting me a lot. I'm joking, kind of not. Have you guys ever thought about maybe holding space for having a conversation with parents that are not reacting well to these situations? I feel like I know a lot of kids and or adults, children, that would really benefit from having other parents have conversations with their parents, because a lot of times I feel like as a parent, we sit there and we go, well, I know better than you. I'm gonna be better than you know yourself.
Yeah, I'm super glad you asked that. So that kind of gets to the point of why we wrote the book. So the first reason is to kind of be an antidote to all the lies and to kind of tell a true story. And the second thing would be to help parents like us that find themselves in a situation where we did not anticipate any of this. So this was, which is great, but it's like we didn't have the tools, we didn't have the knowledge. But the third thing, speaking to your point, is I kind of see this book as a Trojan horse to start a conversation on human dignity and bodily autonomy on a larger scale. This is just the framing that we have put it in, but it's really intended to kind of spur that conversation because that's really where we need to be, what we need to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
We do have a question.
And we'd be happy to.
Right.
We'd be happy to.
Yes, we'd be happy to have somebody who wants to be by the side.
So you have a question from YouTube. Van YouTube says, I love advice that you're willing. I'm genderqueer and advocate and parent to a trans son. My intuition tells me to fight for my kids' rights, and he asks me to leave it be. He uses the girls' bathroom and is called his dead name by most teachers at school. Obviously, his friends call him his name, but I'm feeling a bit stuck because he wants to just exist without help. But I feel this is damaging.
Hi, Van.
Yeah, that's a
We
lot.
love Van.
And so I'm super glad I couldn't make this in person because I'm just really touched how you shared your story. Anything you'd like to say to them?
Wow. Do you have? I think we have to respect our kids and where they are and, keep telling them how proud we are of them and just offering what we can and letting them make that decision. I think that's so hard as a parent to want to do something that they don't want you to do. But that's tough. I can actually say even I had a conversation with her doctor about her before she started hormones about saving her ability to have children in the future. And she was 14 at that time. And that was really hard. She was like, nope, I'll adopt. If I want kids, I'll adopt. There's lots of kids that need good parents. And I think that was the one time that I was kind of struck by how emotional I was. But I was like, I said, oh, so many people might say that when they're young, but when they're older, they may change their mind. And she was just so definite. And, when I thought about all the possibilities of how you would save sperm and forcing a child to do that, I thought, nope, not going there. She's making this call. So, but it's hard.
Awesome. Well, I want to be mindful of time. We're right at the time that we're ending as far as being up here. We do have the space for about another 50 minutes or so. So feel free to help yourself to waters and snacks and talk amongst yourselves. First of all, thank Angie and Michael for we have books for sale on the left. There's a QR code if you'd like to get a copy of the book.
And also, if you aren't prepared to buy one tonight, they are rediscovered. And last week we were number 5 on their list.
I will tell you the needy part. So Mike is he'll give a friend a book or he'll know they have it. And I think it's about 34 hours he expects to have a response. And if you don't get to him, he gets really anxious about how they need the book. And that was the needy part.
Mm-hmm. This last week we were number 10.
That's great. It's also common mind for your friends and your family.
Right.
But yeah, thanks everyone for showing up this evening. Thank you to the Washington Human Rights Teams. I always get my words mixed up. Thank you to the place. check it out every times. And
Yeah, that's it.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Check out Trans Joy Boise. We did record this tonight, so we will be able, if you want to share this with a friend or a family member or somebody, it'll be wherever you listen to podcasts at Trans Joy Boise or on YouTube. So thanks so much for coming tonight.
Thank you so much.
So, I was thinking it was Preston.
It is, but
Okay.
I use Pacey.
Big news, Boise. We're building something incredible. A private community for Trans Joy Boise is set to launch next month. This is your chance to sign up and get in on the ground floor. We are creating a space for connection, support, and growth, and we are looking for members who want to be a part of something special and professionals passionate about hosting webinars, leading in-person events, moderating discussions, and sharing expertise to enrich the trans community. If this sounds like you or someone you know, don't wait. Fill out our form located in the show notes and help us add value to this vibrant space before we officially open the doors.